this works. I'm actually on my way up to Champaign right now, and I'm testing out putting the camera essentially on the air conditioner. I'm going to turn that off and just sweat it out with you guys for a minute. So not getting interruption from that sound. Not that you're getting any interruption from my voice being completely stupid. This is going to be the third take and probably the second upload of this video, but it's become rather salient recently with the Latius raids that we're getting. So far I've been in 3 raids within a week where we have just flunked out with what we thought should have been enough people. 6, 5, and 7. But on the same token, we did a raid with him having outrage with 6 people and were just fine once. And 3 other guys and myself, we went out to Ballard Nature Center out in Altamont. There's just 4 of us, and we 4-manned a Latius. And it's just kind of made it very clear that you can't just necessarily judge how well you're going to do in these raids just based on the number of people. If you've got like, an army of 13, 14 people, it doesn't really matter what everyone does as long as they're tapping their screens. You're going to win in that situation just because you have so many bodies. But it's just one of those things where if you have a marginal number of people, you need everyone pulling their weight, and not everyone, has, I understand, the time and the resources in order to do that. But I want to paraphrase a guy. Oh, I can't remember his name. I'll include it. I have a source for it. I just remember reading it on Twitter. I'm like, hey, that guy, knows what he's talking about. His name is like Reno, I think. But I don't have it on me at the moment. I don't want to look at my phone while I'm driving. And essentially he said one of the most selfish things you can do is not be successful. I mean, think about it. When you're doing one of these raids, it's a group collective effort. And if you're not successful, that means you can't help anyone else be successful too, because these things, nobody can do them alone. Nobody. It is mathematically impossible for just one person to do pretty much anything 4-star and above. There's some 4-stars that can be duoed. I've duoed a couple of Absols, for example. But when it comes to this Latius, probably real talk, you're going to need at least 4 people. Because when we did it, we had 2 seconds left. But we did it. It had an easy moveset, granted. So, what I'm hoping to do with this is to give everyone a very quick rundown of how to get good. Learn to parry, don't panic roll, etc. Okay, wrong game. Basically, there's 3 things you're going to need to know and 3 bad habits you're going to have to break. And the game doesn't have a lot of moving parts, so it's all fairly simple. The 3 things you need to know: stats, types, and movesets. And there's only 3 stats in the game. There's attack, defense, stamina. I'm going to put some links at the bottom of this video to the quote from that Reno guy, for starters, because I do want to credit him. And basically a thing that lists all the Pokemon stats, a thing that lists all their type relations to one another, and something that it shows all the possible movesets that are in Go right now. They're very important resources. I use them a lot. Credit to the people who made them, because I didn't. Alright, the first one, that species list. What you want to do on there is look through and find the Pokemon that have an attack power of around 200 or better, and have a CP of at least, a combat power that is at least like in the 2200 range, minimum. I mean, there are a couple exceptions here and there, kinda, sorta, but that's basically what you want. The only real attack that the raid boss has is the timer. He doesn't kill you with outrage or dragon breath or anything like that. He kills you with the timer. And all he's doing is trying to run out the clock. So you have to be offensively minded. Defense has its place, but it has to be serving your offense. It has to be about keeping your really strong guy in the fight as long as possible. That's a lot of smoke ahead. Is that just some guy hitting the gas? I hope so. Oof. Some guy burning some oil here on the road. Oh yeah, it's that truck right there. Anyway, back where I was saying. So you need Pokemon that have high damage potential. Glass cannons are generally preferable to tanks, but if a tank can also hit fairly hard, for example, Vaporeon has an attack power of about 200. He has a good moveset. He's a water type, all good things, and he's also quite tanky. Vaporeon is good. Gyarados is probably better in a raid setting. Kyogre is even better because he's huge. But, you know, not everyone's going to have 50 Kyogres, right? So it's just one of those things. They're kind of that's the reason Candy exists, is to try to spread out your team, make it a little diversified and flavorful. So pick a bunch of the water types that have, you know, stats about where you want them, and just go with that. And generally speaking, you should probably be trying to get like 3 good attackers for every major offensive type. Because most things have 2 or even 3 weaknesses. And if you've got 3 attackers of each type, you're going to have 6 guys that can be super effective against it. Moving on to that, let's talk about type. Basically, Pokemon is a big game of rock, paper, scissors. Fire beats grass, grass beats water, water beats fire, and around it goes. Fighting beats dark, dark beats psychic, psychic beats fighting, etc. The most important thing in a fight is that your guy is super effective and preferably not vulnerable. Because if your guy is vulnerable, he gets knocked out too quickly, he doesn't stay in the fight long enough to do any damage. It's like, yes, you know, your Dragonite might do fairly decent damage against Latias, but he takes an outrage to the face and doesn't dodge. We'll get to that later. He just drops immediately and you don't do any damage. And while your guy is fainting out, he's not doing any damage. And while you're putting in your second, your third, and your fourth team, I've heard of people putting in 4 teams before, you're not doing any damage during that interim period, and you need to be laying on the gas as much as possible. The amount of damage you lose by dodging on occasion is nothing compared to the amount of damage you lose by having to send in your weaker second, third stringers. So learn the typing. Once you understand what is resistant, what is weak to other things, the game treats immunity as basically double resistance, which means that things that originally were completely immune because their immunity covered up a weakness are now just resistant, and stuff that has a stacked resistance and immunity is now super resistant. For example, Zapdos and Ground versus Flygon and Electric. So once you start understanding how the types stack on each other, you can look at something and go, okay, he's weak to this, he's weak to that, he's double weak to that, he's resistant to that. And when you go into a fight, you want as many of your attacks to be super effective as possible, or at least neutral. And if you're actually using something the guy is resistant to, you want your charged move to be super effective. For example, if you're sending a Gardevoir out against Latias, she works. She can take a hit because she's resistant to Psychic, double resistant to Dragon, but both of her charge moves are things that Latias is resistant to. But Dazzling Gleam is a really great attack and hits like a truck against a Dragon type, so Gardevoir is worth it. Generally, one of the things you want to avoid is, I'll get to that later, that's one of the habits. Okay, third thing you need to know, move sets. This is fairly simple. Most of the moves are technically balanced against each other, so one isn't necessarily better than the other. Like if it has low DPS, it usually has high energy, so it lets you build up your build up your charge moves faster. For example, Charge Beam versus Thunder Shock. But generally, the main thing you want to look at is getting Pokemon whose attacks are the same type as it is, because that gives you what's known as the same type attack bonus, or stab. That's an extra 25 damage. The game doesn't show it, but trust me, it's there. And if you aren't getting stab, you want to be using a super effective attack on a Pokemon with a high damage. For example, Ursaring actually does work as an off-type fighting type, or even an off-type fairy type with Play Rough. You can get a full fighting moveset with, I believe it's counter and close combat, and he can serve as an off-type fighting type fairly well, but that's only because he has a really high attack. Then you've got stuff like Blissey, who, because his attack power is so low, you never send him into a raid, because he's not going to do enough damage. He'll be in the fight for a long time, and he'll do jack all during that time, even if he's super effective, or even if he's got stab from Pound Hyper Beam, or he's getting super effective from Zen Headbutt, Dazzling Gleam, or whatever. It's just his attack power isn't there, so don't bother. It is acceptable to use Pokemon if they have slightly lower attack, if you're being super effective, and if they have the other stats to back it up. For example, Lapras and Walrein with, you know, Ice Beam, Blizzard, and whatnot. If they're pounding on a dragon, they're fine. But if you're using them against something they're just neutral or even resistant to, you're just hurting yourself. Okay. Also, I have a tendency to favor 2 or even 3 bar attacks, you know, the ones that use 50 and 33 rather than 100 energy, because they might technically do less damage per second, but they are usually more energy efficient. They do more damage per energy. You're more likely to get one off right at the end before you get knocked out. You know, that one last Dazzling Gleam or that one last Discharge, which you don't get because you can throw them out sooner. Because you're getting energy when you're hit, you don't have a bunch of energy that overflows when you take a big hit when you've already got a full bar. That being said, Hydro Pump and Solar Beam are both excellent, don't get me wrong. But generally speaking, I prefer Outrage over Draco Meteor, for example. And I prefer Thunderbolt over Thunder and Zap Cannon. Alright. Let's talk about the 3 bad habits. There are 3 really bad habits that people have that you really need to break. The first one is, I just send out whatever the game recommends me. The game recommends you, for raids, stuff that is defensive in nature. Like, whenever it sends out my 2 Dragonites, it'll actually send out the one with the lower CP first, because it has the higher defense value. And it sends out stuff that is resistant to whatever you're fighting. Which, especially when you're fighting like dragon and psychic types like we are now, what ends up happening is it sends out a bunch of steel types like Agrons and whatnot that are very resistant, but that they don't do very much damage, because Agron only has like a 200 attack power, and even with steel type attacks, he doesn't really have anything except Dragon Tail that's super effective against Latias, and even then he's not getting stab on it. His attack power isn't all that high. He's a tank. So throwing out a bunch of Agrons and whatnot is, you're kind of hurting yourself. Yes, that they'll last a long time, but they won't do nearly as much damage as you would if you were to send out, you know, an Ice type, for example, even. Like Lapras is kind of suboptimal because of his low attack power, but I'd rather see an army of Laprases against Latias than I would an army of Agrons. So once you learn the 3 things I taught you, and it's going to require a little bit of homework and a little bit of, you know, practice on your part. It's not going to happen overnight. It didn't happen for me overnight. I've been playing Pokemon for like, what, darn near 20 years at this point. But once you figure that out, you know, you can actually custom build your own teams. You can use the party system. That's what I do. I have parties set up for each individual, like, move set that the current big raid boss has, and you can tell what the raid boss's moves are generally from what the game recommends you, but that's not what you actually want to send in. That works if you have like 14 people, but if you had 14 people who are all sending in their killers right off the bat, like just immediately, you'd smoke the thing in like, you know, 60 seconds flat, and then everybody only has to revive like 1 or 2 guys because nobody got knocked out because you just beat the raid boss down so fast. So that's the first habit to break, is learn all those things and actually custom build your team and mold it to the task at hand, and just everything will go a lot more smoothly for everyone. Number 2, bad habits. I don't dodge. I've seriously heard of people sending in their 3rd and 4th team on stuff when I have gone through maybe like 3 guys. The problem with not dodging is that it might feel like you're doing more damage because you're burning through it, and then you're using the energy from the charged attack to get off your own charged attack. It feels like you're doing more damage, but when you get knocked out, you do less damage, and chances are your first couple of guys are going to be the really high damage ones. And once they get knocked out, you're going to have to spend more time sending in your second stringers, and they're not going to do as much damage, and they're going to get knocked out almost immediately, and they're not doing damage while they're fainting, etc., etc., etc. Now, I would recommend taking the raid boss's fast moves to the face, just taking that on the chin, and just keep powering through that. But when you get the sense that he's about to use that charge move, dodge that. If you dodge the charge move, you can keep your big heavy hitter in the fight for like, 2, 3, 4 times longer than normal. And you lose just a little bit of damage every time you dodge, but you keep your Tyranitar in the fight, you keep your Gardevoir in the fight, you keep your Mewtwo in the fight, you keep your Alakazam in the fight, whatever it is. And now the one thing I will cite here, though, is that if you know the charge attack is going to knock you out, if you didn't dodge it, at that point you might want to take it on the chin, because they still haven't fixed the dodge bug, what I call getting ghosted. And if you find yourself getting ghosted, just send in a new guy. Just immediately. Or if you know that the guy is about to use a charge attack, let the charge attack finish your ghosted guy off, and then send in another guy. Alright. 3rd, final bad habit that people need to break. I don't power my stuff up, I just use what I've got. This is the people who have, like, they might have an absolute army of, Groudons or Kyogres or, Rayquazas, whatever they have. They just have, like, 20 of them, right? But all of them are either, like, level 20 or maybe 25 if they caught it while it was weather boosted, right? They never put any candy into it. They never put any Stardust into it. They just send out, like, the base level thing. Now, that's a big mistake just from a mathematical perspective, because, again, you're going to have less defense, you're going to have less stamina, so you're going to go down quicker, you're going to have less attacks, you're dealing less damage while you're in, and because you're going down quicker, if you're sending in whatever the game recommends and you're not dodging, you're just burning through guys. You're going to need 20 revives after the fight. Getting on the interstate. And you're actually costing yourself in the long run, because it's going to take you forever to get all the items back in order to heal up all those guys that you just burnt through. And you weren't even dealing optimal damage while you were doing it, because all your guys were basically just straight out of the box flunkies. What I recommend doing is you want to raise your heavy hitters to at least level 30. I can't remember the exact break point where that is, because the game doesn't explicitly tell you the level of your Pokemon for some stupid reason. But basically, spend enough candy and Stardust on them until you start seeing the number of the CP it gains drop in half. And if you do that, essentially at that point your Pokemon has about 90% of the power it's ever going to have. And you can reach that point at, I believe, like level 28 or 29. So literally at level 30 you have potentially 90% of all the power you're ever going to have, and it just gets really expensive and grindy to buy them up after that. I do it myself personally because I'm stupid like that, but I mean, you should see some of the numbers on my guys. That I don't have like a big spread like a lot of other people have, and chances are they're actually using authentic, I swear to God. So, in conclusion, this is the Git Good Rant. It's pretty much all you need to know. If you do a little research, do a little homework, follow this advice, eventually everyone's going to be just trained, honed hunter-killers. And that's what you want, because you want to be a hunter-killer and be successful, because that allows everyone else to be successful. And how can you help people if you are not yourself competent? So you have a, in my opinion, it's a video game, so don't take this as a huge thing, but you do have a moral obligation to be competent so that other people can rely on you, if you want to be the kind of person that other people rely on, rather than one that requires other people to raise you up. Instead of you being reliant on other people, if you want other people to be able to rely on you, you gotta get good. Learn stats, learn typing, learn the movesets, send in custom teams, actually die!